Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, September 18th. Welcome to the Inside Edge. So tomorrow marks a somber anniversary that I'm sure all of you know by heart. It is the 144th anniversary of President James Garfield's death. There's a New Jersey connection here, but first I want to talk a little bit about Garfield's life and presidency. I recently read a book on Garfield. Full disclosure, also I'm supplementing some of this with information from Wikipedia. So Garfield was a congressman and previously a state senator from Ohio. He served in the Union Army during the Civil War. And in 1880, he became the Republican nominee for president, sort of by accident. The Republican Party at the time was split between two warring factions. One of those factions was intent on securing a third non-consecutive term for Ulysses S. Grant. At the time, presidents limiting themselves to 2 terms was the custom, but not the law. And another faction was equally committed to denying Grant the presidency. And at the 1880 Republican Convention, those two factions butted heads over and over again. They kept on taking votes and being unable to come to a consensus on who the nominee should be. Garfield was there in order to nominate one of the anti-Grant candidates, but after ballot failed to come to a decision, there was a break towards Garfield himself. Suddenly, Republicans at the convention decided that Garfield was a good compromise candidate, and he was thrust into the nomination. Presidential elections in that era were sort of unrecognizable from what they are today. The candidates were not really expected to campaign. It was seen as unseemly. Instead, campaigning was left up to the parties themselves and their allied newspapers. And Garfield ended up winning in November by a narrow margin, and he took office in March of 1881. He, in some ways, was the last real president of the Reconstruction era, or who at least was committed to the idea of Reconstruction. He was very committed during the Civil War to abolition, and he remained devoted to the cause of ensuring that freed slaves and their descendants maintained the rights that the Constitution guaranteed them. Even afterwards, that's something that a lot of politicians of that era could not say for themselves. And it's an issue that sort of faded into the woodwork for decades and decades after Garfield was president, until finally it reemerged mainly during the Civil Rights era. He also became president during a time when civil service reform was a really hot topic, whether presidents should continue the practice of awarding lots of government positions based on patronage and relationships, or whether they should begin doing it more on merit. I trust you can see some of the New Jersey connections in that. And that debate was ultimately what led to Garfield's demise. There was a deranged man named Charles Guiteau who was convinced that he was owed a position in the Garfield administration. He claimed that he had done work that had elected Garfield to the presidency, and no such thing had happened. And in July of 1881, Guiteau accosted Garfield at a DC train station when Garfield was headed to New Jersey and shot him. The shot was not necessarily going to be fatal, but the doctors of the era did not have our modern medical practices, so they poked and prodded it with unsanitized hands and instruments and made Garfield worse. He steadily declined over the following months. In early September, he decided to get out of the sticky heat of DC and move up to New Jersey instead. He settled in a coastal mansion in Long Branch. Volunteers had to lay new train tracks the night before so that his train could get right to the mansion. And he spent his final couple of weeks in Long Branch. I found a quote from his personal secretary about that time that I thought was pretty haunting. To this day, I cannot hear the sound of the low, slow roll of the Atlantic on the shore, the sound which filled my ears as I walked from my cottage to his bedside, without recalling again that ghastly tragedy. That's a new angle on the shore if I've ever heard one. And finally, on Monday, September 19th, 1881, Garfield died. I have always felt a personal, or not always, but I feel a personal connection with Garfield because he is the only president who has attended the college that I went to, Williams College in deep rural Massachusetts. And he might remain the only president to have ever gone there unless Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy can pull off the improbable. I've even got a little Garfield $1 coin as something of a good luck charm that I carry around. And of course, going to the same college as a long dead ex-president does not make me special in any way. But I will just remind my two colleagues that even though George Washington University is named after a president, none of them have gone there.